Everything shattered the moment a private promise became public betrayal, because this was never supposed to leave the room. Not a whisper, not a hint, not even a suspicion, and yet, within days, the silence was broken so loudly it echoed across the world, exposing something far darker than a simple mistake. Because when a king asks for loyalty and gets exposure instead, you're no longer looking at a family dispute, you're staring at a calculated pattern hiding in plain sight.
It is war! The Daily Mail destroy Prince Harry. The Duke of Sussex's public humiliation is now complete. Not only will the cost of his failed lawsuit against the publishers of the Daily Mail further deplete his finances, be clear, Harry is broke. His reputation has been absolutely wiped out.
Breaking today, Meghan Markle has just disgustingly broken the terms of the Sandringham Summit in her latest TV farce, because I am completely disgusted by the fact that confirmation of Ms. Markle as a guest judge on MasterChef Australia shows that she is absolutely making money off her so-called royal connections.
I think he's so devious and led by her that the whole let's get back in with the king thing is based on two facts. One, the king is ill.
Yes.
And they see an opportunity to perhaps manufacture or wheedle their way, that's an English word, back in.
He's got a very expensive lifestyle, very expensive wife, and they expected it in a certain manner, and they are going through cash like something else. They're not making the money from the contracts that they thought they'd make. He made a good load of money from his book and Netflix contract originally, but a lot of these things, they might be front-loaded, but they're not worth the 100 million plus that many people thought they were going to be worth. And actually, he just wanted to bring this case because he wanted some money.
A king trusted his son with one simple request, and that request wasn't complicated, it wasn't political, it wasn't strategic, it was human. Keep this private. That was it. One line, one boundary, one last attempt to believe that everything broken could still be repaired behind closed doors. And Harry agreed. Harry promised. Look closely at that moment, because everything that follows depends on it. Promises in this story are not just words, they are signals. Signals of intention, signals of truth, signals of what comes next. And what came next was not reconciliation. It was exposure. Fast, immediate, almost rehearsed.
Interesting though, as this particular development happened, Harry told, and this is from an excellent source, that he was going to reel back from public exposure. To you and I, that means endless interviews, whinging on. Well, that was a tissue of lies, because literally 2 days before, he called His Majesty's government a whitewash. Now, this is all just put down to, oh, Harry's hot-headed. He's an imbecile. You don't see that, particularly when they hold the power in their hands as to what happens to you next.
But here's where it turns from disappointing to disturbing, because a new recording surfaced and suddenly the entire narrative flipped. This wasn't a failed attempt at healing. This looked like a setup, a carefully constructed sequence where every move led to the same outcome. Publicity, attention, and if you follow the timing, the cracks begin to widen. Why agree to privacy if you were already preparing to speak? Why promise silence if the microphone was already waiting? These aren't emotional mistakes. These are decisions.
Well, we know it's frantic because we know Harry is desperate, and he was desperate before losing to the Daily Mail. Just think how desperate he is now.
This is the moment everything changes, because King Charles made a decision that now looks almost painfully naive. After years of tension, after public accusations, after reputational damage that could never fully be reversed, King Charles still chose to believe. King Charles chose hope over history. King Charles chose to trust that this meeting was about family, about reconciliation, about something real. And here's the detail that changes everything. King Charles was vulnerable. King Charles was dealing with cancer. That context matters, because vulnerability invites honesty, or it invites exploitation.
Eager Charles has always hoped to see his grandchildren. He's still undergoing treatment for cancer, and family matters more than ever. Despite years of public fallout, he would not pass up the opportunity to privately see his grandchildren. This is true, and what's happened is Archie and Lily have been the trump card. That is what Harry and Meghan have leveraged, and they have won on that one. So it's interesting with Harry and Meghan, but they've had a a good week and a bad week. A bad week losing the court case.
Before the meeting, one condition was set. Not 10, not a list of demands, just one. What happens in that room stays in that room. No leaks, no press, no narratives, just family. And Harry agreed. Harry looked King Charles in the eye and promised. That moment should have meant something. It should have been the turning point. But instead, it became the setup for the next contradiction.
And this, remember, is on the back of a very private meeting. Whatever the other people say, a very private meeting behind the scenes with His Majesty the King, throughout with Queen Camilla. And this is the thanks that they get for that particular time. He was warned, and obviously I'm sure William's thinking, told you so?
Because within days, not weeks, not months, days, Harry was speaking publicly again. Not carefully, not respectfully, publicly, and not about healing or rebuilding or protecting the privacy he had just promised. Instead, the tone shifted completely. Crude jokes, personal revelations, a complete collapse of the boundary that had just been agreed upon. And this is where people start asking the question that refuses to go away: was the promise ever real?
Literally, a couple of days later, he goes on a podcast which was a complete hot mess called, what's his name? Something part Joe, who knows what it was called, but it's featured in yesterday's show. You need to check it out. He goes on a podcast, makes a joke of himself, and talks about his reproductive organs in an X-rated interview that I can't even quote on a family show.
The king kept his side. Harry didn't even make it to the weekend. That's not a slip. That's not pressure. That's not misunderstanding. That's a pattern repeating itself so precisely it almost feels predictable. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Promise privacy. Break privacy. Claim reconciliation. Contradict reconciliation. Reject royal identity. Monetize royal identity. Over and over again, the same cycle plays out, just with different platforms, different audiences, different justifications. And when you step back, the individual moments stop looking like isolated incidents and start forming something much bigger, something structured, something intentional. Because this isn't the first time a promise was broken. It's not even the second. It's a chain, a sequence, each link connected to the next, each contradiction building on the last. And the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that the story being presented publicly does not match the actions happening privately. Then comes the detail that shifts everything from emotional to transactional. The appearances, the deals, the performances built entirely on the very identity that was supposedly being rejected. You can't claim to walk away from something while simultaneously using it as your primary currency. You can't reject the institution while profiting from its existence. And yet, that's exactly what keeps happening. Look at the timing. Look at the sequence. Legal defeat. Public pressure, financial questions, and suddenly appearances start appearing, interviews start happening, opportunities start being accepted, not quietly, not subtly, publicly, commercially, and always with one underlying thread running through all of it: money. Because once the court case collapsed, once the claims were dismissed, once the credibility took a hit that couldn't be spun away, something shifted, the urgency increased, the visibility increased, the contradictions became louder, not quieter, and that's when people started connecting the dots in a way they hadn't before. This wasn't just about a broken promise anymore. This was about motive. Why break the agreement so quickly? Why risk the only remaining trust left? Why move so publicly right after such a private moment? The answer isn't emotional. It's strategic. Because every move that followed the meeting wasn't about repairing the past. It was about controlling the narrative of the present. The moment the court collapsed, the illusion didn't just crack, it completely disintegrated, and what replaced it wasn't sympathy, it was scrutiny. Because when 987 separate claims are dismissed without a single one standing, you're no longer dealing with a misunderstood narrative. You're looking at a total breakdown of credibility that no amount of explanation can quietly repair. And this is where everything accelerates, because the court didn't simply say the case was weak. The court effectively said the foundation itself didn't exist, and once that happens, every previous statement starts getting re-examined under a completely different light. Think about the scale of that moment. 4 years of accusations, 4 years of positioning, 4 years of building a narrative around victimhood, all brought into one courtroom, all tested under one system designed to separate truth from performance, and the result was absolute dismissal. Not partial, not mixed, absolute. And when the judge went further, when the judge questioned truthfulness itself, the impact wasn't just legal, it was reputational in a way that follows every future move. Because once that label is attached, every new statement carries the weight of doubt. And what happened next didn't calm the situation. It escalated it. Because instead of stepping back, instead of going quiet, instead of allowing time to reset the narrative, the exact opposite happened. Public appearances continued. Conversations continued. And not carefully constructed ones either. The tone shifted into something that confused even those who had been watching closely, because the contrast became impossible to ignore. On one side, serious claims about privacy, dignity, and principle. On the other side, voluntary exposure, personal jokes, and public commentary that undermined everything that had been argued before. That contradiction is what people couldn't reconcile. You can't fight for privacy in court and then openly dismantle your own boundaries in public. You can't argue that your dignity was violated while willingly turning your own life into content. And when those two realities exist side by side, the audience doesn't get confused, they start questioning intent. Then the financial layer enters the picture, and suddenly the pattern becomes sharper. Because once the legal defeat introduced massive costs, once the pressure of that outcome became real, every subsequent decision starts to look less emotional and more calculated. Appearances aren't just appearances anymore, they're revenue. Interviews aren't just conversations anymore, they're positioning. And every platform becomes an opportunity to recover what was lost elsewhere. The references to past deals failing, the quiet acknowledgement that expected income streams didn't materialize the way they were supposed to, the suggestion that major projects underperformed all of it builds toward one uncomfortable possibility, that the pressure wasn't just reputational, it was financial. And when financial pressure intersects with public visibility, decisions start being made differently, faster, louder, more visibly. And this is where the comparison becomes unavoidable, because while one side appears to be reacting, the other side appears to be stabilizing. William moves differently, not louder, not more dramatic, just more consistent. The contrast isn't about personality, it's about direction. One side looking backward, trying to correct, defend, and reframe. The other side moving forward, building, presenting, reinforcing, and when those two trajectories run side by side, the gap doesn't just widen, it becomes impossible to ignore. The public sees that difference, the institution sees that difference, and more importantly, the people who will eventually make decisions based on that difference are already watching, quietly, carefully, because what's happening now isn't just a moment, it's a buildup, a series of signals being recorded, evaluated, and remembered for later. And then the final layer comes into focus. Titles, status, position, not as symbols, but as leverage. Because once discussions begin at that level, once conversations shift from behavior to consequence, the stakes change completely. This is no longer about perception. This is about structure, about what remains and what can be removed. And when you connect that back to everything that came before the broken promise, the public contradiction, the legal collapse, the financial pressure, it stops looking like isolated events and starts looking like a trajectory heading towards something inevitable.